How's it going, guys? Back with another video today. I thought this time we'd take a break from doing drums with Groove Agent and look at something different. So today we're going to look at UHE Zebra 2.8, which is one of my favorite soft synths. It really is a workhorse of a synthesizer. It can do pretty much anything. It's one that I haven't seen a whole lot of content amongst D&B YouTubers. Most people tend to be using Serum or Massive to create their bass lines. But this synth is incredibly underrated, and I'm not really sure why I haven't seen so much content as for those two synths. Considering this synth is actually over 10 years old, it's quite impressive what it can achieve. It's created by Urs Heckman, the developer behind UHE. He also created a custom designed version for Hans Zimmer, which incorporates all of the filters from his modular virtual analog synth Diva, which is another great UHE synth you should check out if you haven't. Today we're going to be having a quick look at an overview of how to use it. At face value, it is quite a complicated looking software synthesizer versus, say, Xverse Serum or NI Massive. As a wavetable synth, I don't think it does wavetable quite as well as Serum, because you can't import your own samples or even pictures to create wavetables from. You have to use a third-party plugin or third-party software called WAV2 Zebra to import wavetables from other synths, for example. But it does also have 4 FM operators, so it doesn't do FM quite as well as FM8. It doesn't have quite as many different sound sources in the FM operators as FM8 and 2 less operators. But the fact that you can actually combine wavetable oscillators and FM operators in the same patch makes this a very powerful synth for sound design, which is obviously why Hans Zimmer uses it. The Dark Zebra version, which was his custom-made version, was used quite extensively in his sound design for the Dark Knight movie trilogy scores. So today we're going to have a quick look at an overview of Zebra and Zebra HZ. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, and let's jump in. Okay, so here we are in Cubase 10. I have an initialized preset from UHE Zebra 2 here. This is the new user interface that was introduced in version 2.8. The original interface looked like this, and compared to the new one, as you can see, it's kind of janky, small, hard to kind of, see everything. And this is also what the free version Zebra CM, which comes with Computer Music Mag every month, kind of looks like. The 2.8 update did actually give 2 new user interfaces. The other one looks like this, and it's a bit more kind of Serum-esque in its color scheme. The one we'll be working with today is going to be Dot 8, which is my personal favorite out of the 2 new ones. So the way this works is on the left panel here, this is where all of our noise generators are going to be located, and also all of our effects in this signal flow here. This is our signal path, and on the global tab here, this is kind of our main effects and 2 send buses. On this side, this is where modulation sources will show up as we add them. Now that is a good point to bring up, because one thing I love about this synth is it only shows what you're using. As you add multiple oscillators or FM operators, they show up here. As you add multiple modulation sources, they show up here. With this initialized preset, all we have here is one wavetable oscillator, which at the moment is, as you can see, one sawtooth wave. So if we hit a key here, there's our sawtooth wave. I'm going to go into the global tab and we'll just pitch this down a full octave. Okay, I'm going to turn up the volume here of the amplitude of this channel to maybe 75%. And by default, LFO1 is showing up here because it is mapped by default to vibrato. And envelope 1, as you can see, is mapped to our amplitude envelope for these 4 channels here. Now the way this works is you can add multiple oscillators. If you click anywhere in here, you can add, oscillator 2. We'll have that one on a sawtooth wave as well. Maybe turn up the volume of this to 75% as well. And as we hit a key, we've got a double sawtooth there. We could detune these, a little bit each way, and that'll give us kind of some basic Reese movement. And that's given us one mono Reese there. Another way that you can kind of use this though is just to do it on one oscillator, like a lot of other software synthesizers. So say you wanted to have multiple oscillators and mix them through one signal path, you could go in here and add one of these mix modules, and Right now, the main input is coming from the same as its channel, so it's input 1. That'll do the same thing. And we'll give it a sidechain input from channel 2. If we mute this, now both of those oscillators will be coming through this one channel. You can hear we're still getting that kind of detuned Reese effect there. And you can adjust the balance of the mix there as well. So that's kind of cool that you can do that. So if we adjust the volume up a little higher here, we could maybe do that and then add a third oscillator here, which we could add a sine wave. Now the best way to create a sine wave oscillator in here is to use one of the other waveform modes. Now with these oscillators, if we go into this one, you can expand the editor by opening that. You can see if I move this, it's going to go from like a thin shape wave through a sawtooth wave into a square wave and into a pulse wave there. So if we go back to the sawtooth there, if you want to create your own and draw them, you can just right click anywhere here, insert points, go like this. And then you can create curves by using Control and Alt. So if we hold Control and drag up and down on this, it'll create a curve on the left side of it, like that. And if we hold Alt, it'll do it on the right side. And that applies to each of these points. So, we could get something a bit more curvy this way. A little less sharp. Go to this one. Do something kind of similar. There we go. So we can see how that sounds. So that's both of those combined. If we were to close this, we're actually getting two different signal paths now. We're getting these two. If we turn this all the way down, both of those are being mixed through this one, and then we're getting this one at 50% volume through here, and then they're all coming through this main bus here. But where this gets interesting is, so, like with massive or something, we could have two different saw waves detuned here. And this one, if we wanted a sine, we can go to oscillator 3, we'll open up the editor. And it has a couple of different ways of creating wavetables. So currently we're in geomorph mode, which is the one I've already gone over. We can go into spectromorph mode and keep in that same thing. This actually works on a frequency spectrum, so from our low end up to our high end. So if we go back to the mixer here, I'm going to mute this one and we'll see how that sounds. Kind of weird. And that's one of the modes I don't really tend to use. If we go to GeoBlend and open the editor on this one allows you to draw your own wavetables. So we could draw something kind of sine-y like this. It's not going to be a perfect sine wave by any means, but something along that lines. But it's incredibly hard to draw a perfect sine that way. So what I tend to do with this is put it into spectroblend mode, and again this works on a frequency spectrum, and you can draw in harmonics. So if we just draw in one harmonic at the very left there, that'll give us one harmonic which is a perfect sine. So that's kind of how I would create a sine wave. And then if we go back, if we close the editor here, we should now have a sine coming through. If we put this up to say 70%, we'll have a sine plus our two detuned saw waves, which just adds, a lot more low end to the bottom there. So that's one way you can work with this. You can also, if I mute these two channels, you can also work with FM operators. So I'm going to add one FM operator here and a second one to modulate with it here. If we go into the FMO tab here, this is where all four of our FM operator settings are. So this is the one we're going to be modulating, which is a pure sine. And this one I'm going to change the source to maybe a quadric sine. And if we go in here, this is going to be FM by input, which means the FM is going to come from FMO1. That's our direct input. So as we increase the FM, you'll notice that we go from a perfect sine to an FM modulated sine. And if we had this one on a pure sine wave, it would do the same kind of thing, but eventually it's going to turn to noise. Or maybe it won't by input, but if we were to take this one out or turn it off and set this one to self-modulate, that's when I think this one would turn to noise. Yeah. So you can have it modulated by itself, by an input. You can have RM, filtered FM, and FM self plus, I believe, is just a louder, kind of a more pronounced modulation from itself. So we'll turn this one back on. I'm going to turn that off there. Or maybe we'll leave that slightly FM. We'll turn this one back on. So now FM operator 1 is modulating itself, and its signal is then being fed. If we set this to a quadric sine, then being fed into FM operator 2 and modulating that as well. Get kind of much more complex harmonics that way. But where this gets kind of cool is you could also move this FM operator to here. So it's being modulated by a wavetable oscillator. Currently that is just a perfect sine. So say we take out this one. I'm going to add oscillator 4 here. We'll move it back over here. Oh, it's because I actually had it muted. That'll do. That'll be why. Let's remove that one. So that's now being modulated by a wavetable oscillator essentially, which is kind of cool. You do also have noise generators that you can add in here, which have, white noise, pink noise, digital noise, and crackles. So those are our 4 sound sources. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to remove this FM one, and we'll go back to our 2 sawtooth waves and our sine. So what we can then do on here is we could add in another mix, or we could, we'll add in another mix module right here. And this one, I'm going to create a sidechain input from oscillator 3. And if we turn the volume down on this one, that means our 2 sawtooth oscillators are being mixed through here, and then that signal is also being mixed with our sine wave oscillator. And that's now all coming through this one signal path here. We could then maybe add some distortion to that, or we could, get rid of this for a sec. We'll keep our sub clean and we'll just distort the 2 sawtooth waves. So the way this works is it shows your noise generators at the top and then effects below it. So it can be kind of clunky coming through here. I think filters also show before distortion. So even if we add a filter after that, a voltage control filter, it's going to be above the distortion, but it is actually after the distortion in the signal path here. So let's have a quick look at the distortion module. It comes with a couple of different distortion algorithms. You've got different stages of tube distortion, hard clipping, foldback distortion. Let's maybe have a look at the tube distortion first. We could try looking at this one. It's also fold back. And then we can start messing with the filter a little bit here. So you've got quite a lot of different filter types as well, lots of different low passes, band passes, high passes. You've got notch filters, you got phasing filters. This decimate is a bit like a bit crusher. These 3 here are modelled on other synths. So you've got the 2 that were originally the byte filters, which were modelled on the Korg MS-20 for Yuhi Diva, and this is the filter from Yuhi's Tyrell N6 freeware synth. So let's have a listen to how some of these filters sound. I'm just going to turn up the resonance a little, maybe give it a little more drive. So that's the exciter filter there, maybe a little less resonance. Let's check out the all-round. The mid-drive. Old drive. You can see these have quite different characters. There's a formant filter, which is a bit like a valve filter. And then a vintage filter. So that's our low passes. We could also try a notch on this. It can be nice to add a few of those and modulate those differently. So that's one way to work with it. Say we, if we set this to sidechain 1, and I'm going to turn this one down now, and we'll turn this one up to, I don't know, 75. So now all we should have playing is this one sawtooth wave oscillator. Another way of doing what we just did with those two saws is you can put this in dual mode here. And like a lot of other synths, if we set that to reset, it'll have two sawtooth waves playing at the same time, and we can detune them a little here. Gives us a more stereo effect. You've also got a mixer here with different widths. So all the way to the left here, this will be mono. And as we increase this, you'll see some stereo spread happen. I do have my span analyzer set up to show the left side in blue, the left side in red and the right side in blue. If you want to know how to set that up, maybe put a comment below and I can create a video showing you how to set up span in stereo analysis mode like that. It can be quite useful. So that's another way you can do it. This width basically acts a little bit like the unison spread in Serum on the oscillators. You can also put it in quad mode, or have 11 stacked on one oscillator, which is kind of how you would get your super saws. So yeah, that's another way to use it. It does also have oscillator effects here. Let's put this back on dual. And you have quite an array of them to choose from here. If I pull up the manual, because off the top of my head I couldn't really tell you what each of these does, but the manual gives you quite a good description on what these oscillator effects actually do, and some of them can be quite fun to modulate. So let's have a look at a couple of them here. For instance, this bandworks is kind of cool. On the left side of the dial it's a band reject or notch filter, and on the right it's a band pass filter. So that's kind of fun to play with. Turbulence can be quite good once you've got quite a complex wavetable going. On a standard saw wave it's probably not going to do quite as much. You can adjust like the formants, the symmetry, all kinds of other stuff. I think brilliance kind of adds some higher frequencies to it. Yeah. You've got phase distortion. So yeah, they've got quite a lot of different parameters that can be tweaked, and these can all be modulated here as well. So moving on to the modulation now. Say we wanted to modulate the wavetable on this oscillator. We could put that onto LFO2. I'm going to put this on a quarter dotted. Maybe turn down the LFO amplitude a little here, and we'll give that a little bit of modulation. Maybe put it on an 1/8 dotted actually. Add a little more movement to it, and you can do the same with envelopes. So say on the filter here, if we move that over to here, we could modulate that with LFO2. Maybe slow that down a little after all. We could also add an envelope to it, so envelope 2. And you can see as I'm adding more modulation sources, they're showing up here. So let's turn that up a little bit, give it And you can also adjust how these envelopes work. So at the moment it's on a quadric slope. You can set them to linear mode or a variable slope. Also adjust the time base. You can add pulse width modulation or hard sync to these as well. So on this oscillator, say we turn on sync, go back to the phase here, and as we adjust this, you'll hear that changing it. There's pulse width modulation as well. So yeah, you've got quite a lot of options just with the oscillator section here, and also, you know, a lot of different effects you can add into this. So there are 4 different voltage control filters, comb filters. These shapers are kind of like a distortion module, so we can add that in here. It does actually also have a foldback distortion. Just turn that one off. If you double click on these, it turns them off, but keeps them there. So if we go back to here now, this is one of the newer modules that was added in version 2.8. It's like a wave folder. And another cool thing here, so say we move these back over to this one, and I'm going to set the input of this mix to sidechain 2 again, and set this oscillator back to single, and I'm going to detune that down to 6 the other way. I think that's how I had them set, yeah. So now if we turn this down, turn this one up to like 75%, we'll turn up our sub as well. And then if we mute that, okay, there's our clean sine. And then here we have these 2 wavetable oscillators being fed into all of these effects here. We can also add cross mod filter. So that's this filter type here. And this one, you can set the sidechain to a different source. So we could put that on oscillator 3, turn down this one, and now oscillators 1 and 2 coming through this signal path here are also going to be mixed with our sine wave oscillator via this filter. You can hear. It also has filter modulation there, overdrive, and you can choose whether you want it in serial, parallel. So let's do 2 in serial. I think this offset kind of spreads the difference in frequency between the 2 filters. So this one we could set to maybe a band pass. We could put that on folded. So you do have quite a lot of different options here for this signal path. Moving down to the effects section, I'm just going to take off that filter And we'll go back to how we had it before. Let's turn this up to 75 as well. So in the global section here, you can add additional effects. So you've got mod effects, which are like a chorus. The chorus is kind of like a flanger chorus hybrid, and then a phaser. So, you know, we could turn down the mix on that a bit. It also has, let's remove that, delays. More of the shapers, more mixing modules. It has a couple of different reverbs. That's the main reverb, and then it also has a new one which was added in 2.8, which I believe is a plate reverb. And then you have, you know, more filters that can be added here, compressors. And then more distortion modules that can be added. These SBs, I believe, are like a sideband module. I haven't really used them. Kind of does some very weird stuff to the stereo spread. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is Zebra. Another thing that can be done is, if we look at the performance tab here, you have these 4 different XY modulations as well. So we could maybe right click on the, let's look at what we got here. On this distortion here, maybe on the input, we could assign that to X1. On the filter cutoff here, we could maybe assign that to Y1. So then in the performance tab here, this should control those. So that's kind of cool as well. It does also have multi-stage envelope generators. So if we go back to the synthesis page here, I'm just going to load up, let's see. Say on this one, we could add, in place of this XMF, or yeah, on this voltage control filter, in place of this envelope, we could add a multi-stage envelope generator. And this is it here. So we can kind of move our points around, and it kind of loops. So we could set that to loop there. You have factory settings here as well, and then in here we can, I think it's Alt and right click to create more points. And the same kind of thing applies if you want to, I think, curve them. You can just kind of drag on the slopes themselves. And then to move the loop point around, I believe, yeah, if you hold the edge, you can like change where it loops. So from maybe that point to that one. And let's see how that sounds if we turn up the modulation amount. Let's maybe set this to a low pass filter. And we could maybe so that's kind of cool as well. A bit like Serum, it has these multi-stage envelopes that you can mess with, which are pretty cool. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is Zebra 2.8. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it. It really is a very powerful and versatile synth. That was basically just a general overview of it. I think in the future we'll be doing some more kind of in-depth sound design stuff with it when we get to creating some bass lines, because I do really like it. It's you know, you can do FM quite well with it, but not quite as well as FM8, and it does wavetable very well. I'll show you as well in a new wavetable oscillator here. You can, you know, there are quite a lot of libraries uploaded on the UHE forums and stuff where you can import ones that have been created by other people or more or duplicated from other synths. So, you know, I've got some virus oscillators and stuff in here as well. Here we go. Bunch of other different ones here that people have created. So let's see what this one is. Let's go back to this one, turn that up, mute these others. Oscillator 4. Kind of some pulse width modulation there. So yep, that is Zebra 2.8. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a very good synth, and it's, like I said, it can look kind of complex at face value. The Hans Zimmer version, which we'll take a quick look at now, is basically the same thing, but it does have extra filters here modeled on the filters within UHE Diva. So if we look at VCF1, you can see we can change the mode. You've got the multi-mode filter, which I believe was modeled on the Juno Alpha and the Jupiter 60. You've got the cascade filter, which was modeled on the Juno 60 and the Jupiter 8. You've got the byte filter, which is modeled off a Korg MS-20, and then the ladder filter, which is modeled off a mini mode. So you can add those in. It also has a Diva high pass filter and 4 compressors, which I think are also from Diva. I don't know, actually. I think it just maybe shows those instead of showing them down here. Let's see. Does that add the compressor? Okay, so yeah, it just has a different UI for the compressors to the other one. But if we go through some of the presets, you're going to see there's some stuff here that's very much reminiscent of the Dark Knight movie. So if we have a look at maybe some, what we got, low ups and stomps, what have we got here? We could maybe look at leads and horns. You can see it's very nice sounding, and I can see why Hans Zimmer uses it a lot. What else have we got here? High ups and chords, back cave crystals. So yeah, very nice stuff. What we got here. And the cool thing here is you can actually go through then and look at some of these patches that have been created by, you know, world-class movie scorers like Hans Zimmer. I think a lot of these were also created by Howard Scarr in the main version, but you know, both the Hans Zimmer version and the regular one have massive libraries of presets here. Yeah, I think only a couple of these were made by Howard Scarr. And let's take a look at some of the presets from the main version of Zebra now real quickly. We could go through maybe pianoids. Organs. A couple of basses. So yeah, very versatile synth, and I'll probably be doing a lot more content on this in the near future. So once again, hope you enjoyed it, guys. Please do like and subscribe if this was helpful to you in any way. I really love this synth. I hope you do too, and feel free to download the demo and play with it if you haven't already got it in your library, because it really is one that should be added to the arsenal. Peace out, guys.